Hello and welcome to a very good social media podcast where we try to live up to that name every day. I'm your host, Zach Gelia. Let's get into it. So, the person I'm bringing on the show today didn't really know her personally until, basically a few weeks ago when we connected about some different hiring and structure things within our organizations. But someone whose work and teams I admired from afar for a very long time. She has worked for most recently the Phillies, Tampa Bay Lightning, the Cleveland Guardians, the Tampa Bay Rays, Major League Baseball. So her resume speaks for itself. She's had a lot of different roles in different areas of those clubs and with the league. So her journey is really interesting. And she basically left the Phillies to go back home to Florida to then end up back with the Phillies to in a place where she missed and loved being. So, very excited to bring Missy Perez, the manager of marketing initiatives with the Philadelphia Phillies, on the show today, and just hear a little bit more about, her life and how she got to where she is today, and really break down those walls of what it takes to hold so many different positions and gain so much knowledge. When I transitioned from 7 years in the NFL to baseball, it was eye-opening of the differences between just the sports and how content is consumed and what the fans are looking for. It's all the same idea. Is you're trying to get fans to stop, you're trying to get them to spend the most time with you and enjoy your content, but there's a different way of doing things, and there's so many different intricacies of baseball and football that separate the two. So with her going from not only from baseball to hockey back to baseball, but also going from, the club side to the league side and back to the club side. So very excited to bring Missy on the show, shine a spotlight on her career and all the great things that her and her teams have been doing. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Missy Perez to the show.
Hey, thanks. I'm excited to be here.
So I mean, you and I think I've been a fan of yours and have followed along for quite some time, but I don't know, like I think we had a call last week, maybe the week before, but aside from that, it's really been just kind of like admiration from afar. So it's cool to get you here and get to talking.
Yeah, no, I was very excited when you reached out because I similar, same thing. Likewise, I feel like you've done a lot of great work for from the Cardinals to now and with the Pirates. So I'm excited to have a chat.
I appreciate it. Well, yeah. So I mean, first things first is, what are you doing now? How did you get there? Like from, I believe, what was it? Plant High School in
Oh
Florida.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Plant High School, the pride of
my
Plant High.
There you go. My parents used to live outside of Tampa and Brandon, Florida, for a long time. So
Oh, okay.
so
Yeah, my
that,
grandmother lived in Brandon.
nice. Yeah. So that name at least rung true, that I knew where that high school was. But so I mean, take me from then. I mean, like, I don't know when this became a career option or an idea in your head, but like from the little girl who's trying to figure out what she wants to do with her life to where you are now, how did it all kind of work?
Yeah, it's very funny actually because I my dad was a doctor, so I always thought I wanted to do medicine. And in high school, speaking of high school, I would volunteer at the hospital, the local hospital in Tampa, over the summer for like 2 years, and I was like, I don't know that I'm cut out for this. So I went to the University of Florida out of Plant, about 2 hours north of Tampa, and thought I wanted to do sports journalism, broadcast journalism, specifically on the sports side. And I always say I got to a point, probably about my junior year of college, where I liked it, but I wasn't passionate about it to the point where like I had a lot of classmates that went on and went to very small markets and covered high school sports in, the middle of nowhere, Michigan. No offense to the middle of nowhere, Michigan, but I just knew that it wasn't necessarily the thing for me. Not that I wasn't willing to put the work in, but more so that I just didn't think that I cared enough about reporting to do that. So it's funny now, like you get these college kids that reach out to you, to hear like, how was your path and how can I get into sports? And I always am like, I feel like I'm aging myself. But when I was about to graduate college, was kind of when social media was becoming like a potential job opportunity in the sports space. I graduated in 2015, so probably around my junior year, 2013-ish, like that was when it sort of started to become a conversation. And I really liked it, really appealed to me because it was still sort of the storytelling aspect, which I really enjoyed about reporting, and obviously the sports, which I really enjoyed, but less of just you know, it allowed me to be a little bit more creative. And I think at my heart, maybe because I'm a huge Gators fan for better or worse, but I struggled with like non-biased reporting on the Gators. I wanted to like support the Gators and have that be a part of my work. So I loved the idea of social becoming something that I could, hone my creativity, but also like it was my job to promote the team. So anyway, from there, I actually randomly lucked into an internship with the Tampa Bay Rays after I graduated. Somebody had just left in the marketing department right before I'd graduated, gotten a full-time job. So I had an interview. I had a contact, so random. My parents were rebuilding our house, and our financial advisor, I always joke that my mom like took it upon herself because I would say, like all my friends from college and whatever, like their parents know somebody in their respective fields. And both my parents were in the medical field. And they were like, well, we don't know anyone in sports and communications. It's like,
Right.
fantastic. So she would ask everyone. It would be like our neighbors, somebody she sees at the grocery store. So actually, our financial advisor, still currently my mom's financial advisor, but at the time knew the vice president of marketing at the Rays and passed my resume along. Somebody had just left. And so they called me and were like, do you want to come in for an interview? And I started like the next week, which was so random and so much fun. From there, I actually moved to Cleveland for a year. My Rays role was a little bit more on the marketing side. And I loved the social aspect of it. I think we had launched a Snapchat at the time, which is again totally hilariously archaic sounding. But we had launched a Snapchat and it was like the new thing. And I got to run that and I realized I liked social. Went from there to a full-time internship with the Cleveland Guardians in 2016, which was so much fun. And then I came to the Phillies in 2017 as part of their newly minted social team at the time. Was with the Phillies for 5 years, actually then left in 2021, moved back to Tampa to help run social for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and then have recently come back to the Phillies about 10 months ago, probably now, more on the general marketing side. So it's kind of funny. I started general marketing, moved more into the digital social, and then ultimately transitioned back out of it. So that's my very long-winded, convoluted answer of how I got to where I am.
No, it's amazing, honestly. Like every person that I've ever come in contact with that's in this industry has some sort of, not linear path to where they are, like, I mean, you're saying you're dating yourself. Like I graduated in 2011 and like TikTok wasn't a thing. You couldn't put video on Twitter. Like there was so many things where it was like, yeah, Snapchat was the brand new thing. And,
Yeah, the hot
you
ticket.
know, yeah. So no, I definitely feel you there. And I went to college in middle of nowhere, Michigan, oddly enough. So, um,
Where in Michigan?
Adrian, Michigan. So
I honestly
Adrian,
haven't heard of
I,
it. That's hilarious. So I actually only used Michigan as an example because one of my classmates went to Alpena for
okay.
like his first role.
Yep.
And I remember being like, I don't even know, like I couldn't even point that out on a map.
No.
But that's really funny. I did not even
Yeah.
know that.
No, I think if you blinked at the right time, you'd probably miss where the town was that my school was in. It was like,
Are you from Michigan originally?
no, I'm from Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's
How did you
been
get to Adrian, Michigan?
so for me, I mean, it was all about hockey. Like I played baseball and hockey all growing up until high school. Basically had an offer to go play at a prep school, play hockey, but it was like I had to pick hockey or baseball and I could hit people in hockey, so I went to play hockey. And so
Fair enough.
everything from there, it was like, how do I make sports my thing? And obviously I wasn't good enough to make it all the way, but college was Adrian College. They were just starting up their hockey program when I was going to college. So it was like the offer was, it's a Division III school, so no scholarships or anything, but it was like, you can, basically help us build this thing from the ground up. And, it was basically a whole class of freshmen with a couple upperclassmen. So it was like 20 of us coming in together and going through it all. So it was a lot of fun, but like,
Yeah, that's cool.
but then like I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. It was like I loved to like paint and write, and there was, the creative side, but it was, I was an athlete for so long. So it was like, what job is out there that can merge those two things together? And it's like, Facebook was just barely a thing when I first was in college and stuff like that. So um, once I got out, like I ended up with a job at the local speedway in Michigan, and I thought it was like a video role. And my boss called me in and said, like, I'm not living up to expectations, because she thought I would take over all the social accounts. And I was like, oh, didn't know that was part of the job, but
Sure.
consider it done. So it's like anytime anyone asks me like, how did you get into this? It's like almost by accident, by happenstance that it just kind of worked out.
Yeah, I do feel it. That is funny. And I feel like you're right, especially like people like around, our age group that started when this started to become something that people were actually hiring for. I feel like it did just sort of become that because like I said, I was more on the marketing side for the Rays as an intern. And then they were like, oh, like we should probably create a Snapchat account. Like, do you want to run it? And I was like, okay, sure. And then I was like, well, this is fun. And I'm like, I like doing this. So maybe I'll continue. So
Yeah,
definitely, definitely funny.
it's wild, yeah, and especially like the staffing that people have for, their social teams now. And it's like when I started with the Steelers, I was their first like full-time social person, and I got hired by the VP of IT was my boss at that time. So it was like it's so funny to see how far things have come from, basically just being like, yeah, it's technology, like you're in IT, to now it's this whole behemoth of an industry.
Yeah, it is. It is funny. That was kind of similar with me with the Phillies. Like I had come over in 2017, I think. And they had MLB had in-game coordinators. So basically like MLB staffed people who were tweeting, and one of my former colleagues who ended up kind of moving over to the Philly side, but that's kind of what their social team was, him as an in-game coordinator. And then I was brought on, and really the two of us kind of tag teamed it for a few years there. So it is really funny how that has changed.
So wow. Well, so like in your career, like you were talking about, like going from, being in front of the camera to, working for teams, working for the league in some capacity, like then working for, hockey, baseball, like take me through, I mean, me personally, like going from 7 years in the NFL to then baseball, it was like, yeah, I mean, content's content. Like we'll be fine. We'll figure it out. And then it was like, well, all of the stuff you take for granted that you just know about the schedule and roster moves and things like that, like everything you already know, it's like, oh no, there's a much more intricate system in this new league that you'll have to figure out before you can get to the, making good content stuff.
That's actually a really good point. And I think something that I didn't think about, I was like, oh, like I know hockey well enough. Like I know the Lightning's roster well enough, but I forget just the difference in free agency and when all the all-star games and all the things like those announcements after working in MLB. I had worked in MLB, I guess I think it had been 7 full seasons probably before I left, ultimately, before then coming back. So I was so ingrained on just like award season and when MVP finalists are going to be announced, and just like all those things were so on the radar that you're right, those are the kind of things that you do have to adjust to that you don't really think about. But no, it was definitely a change. I do think baseball, obviously, the schedule is unlike any other sport, literally, but also just the workload and working in baseball and social is a doozy for sure. So that was something, I will like personally, frankly, was like pretty burnt out by the end of the pandemic, just from, we kind of never stopped. And even if we didn't have games, I felt like a lot of, obligations and stuff were falling on the social team. So I think at the end of that, I was definitely at a point where I was really burnt out. I will say baseball is still, I always like my first love. It was always my favorite sport. So when I graduated college, I didn't really think much about the schedule as much as I was like, oh, I love baseball. So I just thought that was what I wanted to do. And I did find my way back. So I guess ultimately it is what I wanted to do. But when I was looking towards kind of my next career move, the role with the Lightning had come up, and it was very exciting for me in a lot of ways. One, it was like my first opportunity to kind of manage a team of people, which was cool. And at the same time, the schedule seemed nicer. I thought maybe I wouldn't be as in the trenches as much, with coordinators below me, which was the case. But it was definitely an adjustment for sure. And then coming back, it's almost like I never left in a certain way, but it's been fun.
Yeah. All of the like international signing period and how free agency works and the draft being during the All-Star break. Like there's so many things where it's
Oh,
like it took so long for my brain to just wrap around like, okay, well, all of these tentpole events happen at the exact same time. Like what how do we do this?
yeah, and all of it, right? Like the awards at the end of the year,
Yeah.
like random things that, like as a fan, I guess you kind of pay attention to, but don't really, with like the Rule 5 draft and things like that. And you're like, oh God, we need like all of this prepared for
Yep.
that. You just don't think about, I guess.
Yeah. And then it's like, Otani signing with the Dodgers, but it's getting announced that he's winning awards with, Angels gear on. And it's like,
I know.
it's so interesting. But
It
oh
is. It
man.
definitely is.
Yeah. Keep you on your toes, that's for sure.
That
Well,
is the case. Yes.
and so like you mentioned having coordinators underneath you, getting out of the weeds a little bit. That was when I went from the Steelers of being kind of like boots on the ground in charge of doing everything. Like I was making graphics, I was doing, I was covering games, covering events, traveling with the team. It was like that was my focus. It was I had 300 hours of work to do, so I needed to split it up between 7 days and get it done. So whenever I finally got help, it was like, all right, well you do this 50 hours of work, I'll do this 50 and we'll meet up at the game. And then going to Arizona, it was like, okay, well now you don't have to do all that because you have a team that you have to make sure you guide them and make sure that they feel good about what they're doing. And so how did you find that transition? Because there's so many things now that I wish I knew and wish I could have done differently, but it was just like you get kind of thrown to the fire and you have to figure it out.
Yeah. So I had two coordinators below me at the Lightning, and then I kind of absorbed a digital content coordinator who assisted with like our YouTube and stuff to that. So I guess three direct reports, but I had previously just worked like with peers kind of covering our social. And it's funny. And I also think something that I can go into later is coming back to the Phillies and being less on the like game day social role that I am now. Like that kind of you're so used to being so hands-on and stuff all the time that it is almost funny like taking that step back and thinking like, okay, no, I need to let them do it. I need to, you have that like tendency to want to hit send on everything because it's like what you had done before. But I mean, fully transparently, I left the Phillies in the first place to come home. My dad had Parkinson's disease. He was sick and ultimately very unexpectedly passed away 48 hours after I moved back to Florida. So I kind of think I started my job with the Lightning and where I said to my bosses there and everybody there was great. But I was like, I felt like I started the job at, I don't know, 30%. Like I was in a
Yeah,
very tough time. And I was also then starting a new job, which I hadn't done in 5+ years and kind of forgot, all of that goes into a new job also with like the most, traumatic, hardest time that I had gone through personally. So it was
sure.
definitely a very interesting transition for me. I will say a credit to the team at the Lightning. Both my coordinators were fantastic and really didn't need crazy oversight and we're very good and excited and willing to do it. And obviously, I don't know if I give myself enough credit because I remember going to my boss and being like, I feel like I'm operating at like 45%. And they're like, you're doing great. Like why are you worried? So but I did feel personally just from like the standard that I hold myself to from a work perspective that I wasn't meeting that. Um, so I do think, a lot fell on them, which was probably a good experience for them. But at the same time, I think, obviously I was there a year and a half. So as I sort of navigated through grief and crazy things like that, I did feel in a better place of, working with them and helping to kind of mentor them and also still getting to do the fun, things that I enjoyed doing about social. So definitely an interesting path. And I think an important caveat in also me coming back to Philly because I left Philly for a very specific reason. And then the very specific reason I moved wasn't really part of it anymore after he passed. So I kind of had this weird existential crisis, I guess, of like, that was the reason I left. And, all this. So very quickly after I moved back, I was like, I kind of want to move back to Philly. But they always say, like, after, something happens like that, something, traumatic, don't make any rash decisions. And so I think it was like a few months had passed. And I was like, Mom, I like really miss it up there. I really love it. And not even necessarily did I think that I would be going back to the Phillies. That ultimately just worked out how it did. And I'm very happy that it did. But um, I think that my time and period at the Lightning was a very productive time and period of growth for me in so many ways, but it definitely was a very tough time too.
I can imagine. Yeah, oh man, I'm so sorry to hear that.
Oh no, it's okay. I honestly am very much fine talking about it. I think
For
it just
sure.
adds helpful context to kind of my time, I wasn't there typically as long as probably I would have wanted to stay in a role that I just started and also just my, boomeranging back to Philadelphia. But um, yeah, I
Well,
appreciate
yeah.
it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I mean, like it goes to show, like it's all the people that send these horrible comments and, all these things that people say, it's like they're actual human beings that run these accounts and, need that, you know, that hand every now and again. And, it's great and amazing that you had a great team that was there to help you. And, it's so not undervalued, but just not kind of talked about that it's like, you have to be in a good place yourself to be able to put the business and your goals in a good place. And it's like that's never in most of my career. I would say the Pirates are incredible and have been very helpful and really care about, me as a person and me as a leader and how I can grow and how I can take time with my family. And so like, but that's not the same for everywhere. And it for the longest time it's been, you're welcome for having a job because we're a pro
Yeah.
sports
You're
team.
lucky.
And
Yeah, yeah, for
exactly.
sure.
And so like now to see more people being supported and valued, I think has been really good.
Yeah, and I think to that point, to your point about the Pirates, you're like, I've been very lucky. Every organization I've worked for, I have nothing but really great things to say about them. And honestly, when I started the conversation with my boss at the Phillies, Mike Harris, and honestly, when he'd reached out to me about if I had any interest in coming back, I had said to him that honestly, like losing my dad put so much into perspective for me that I'd never gone through anything close to that. I'd never really experienced anything close to that, and it kind of led me to a place where I felt like I miss, and I don't think that this is true, and I don't like to look back with regret, but I was like, I missed all these dates, all these things. Like, I don't know the last time I spent a Father's Day with my dad because that was baseball season and I was in Philadelphia, and just like things like that
Yeah.
where I kind of, I guess, it really put my priorities and stuff at stake. And I think that happened with a lot of people with the pandemic. Just like everyone was like, life is fragile and it's too short, and it's not worth, you know, putting all your effort into work when there are things that are much more important.
Yeah.
So I had said to him, I was like, look, I love the Phillies. I love the team on the on the business side. I would love to come back, but I can't sit at my computer from first pitch till final out. 155 games a year, and
Yep.
I just I'd have to you'd have to work with me on that and figure something out. And if you can't, I understand. But he actually in my time previously with the Phillies had lost both of his parents. And he's very empathetic in that kind of sense of where I was just personally and kind of how I had shifted my priorities a bit. So it's been a nice change, I think, transitioning because I still get to help on the content side and I still get to, have input on that side and the things that I really enjoyed doing, but it's less intensive from a schedule side, which has been nice.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and I mean like it just depending on how your life goes and what those steps are and what those stages are. Like, when I was with the Steelers, I was, I was engaged at the time, but my fiance lived, outside, now my wife outside of Toronto. So it was like my whole life was just work until I got to go up and see her. And so it was like all of the stuff that I did with the Steelers, you didn't really think of, the work life balance. It was just like you got to the end of the season, you're like, man, why am I so tired? And then,
Yeah,
going to Arizona and then having, having my wife with me and then us having our little girl, it was like, this changes everything. And it's like,
totally.
I loved my time in Arizona. So many amazing people, and I couldn't say enough good things about that place. And I'd probably still be there at this point if it wasn't for our little one. But my parents being in Pittsburgh, my wife's parents being just outside of Toronto, it was like, we can't have our little one see their grandparent or see her grandparents, twice a year. So it was like, I don't know how the universe worked where this perfect job came up, and I'm so happy and blessed to be with the Pirates that like it all worked out. But like you said,
It is weird how it happens. Because same with the lightning. I'm like, again, I think all the time. I'm like, what would have happened if you can't live your life like that? But
yeah,
I mean, it literally was. I think I moved home on August 23rd, and my dad passed on August 25th, completely suddenly, like heart attack, unrelated to anything. And I was like, it's just such a weird. And then everyone's like, oh, you thought you moved for your dad. Like maybe it was to be with your mom for that year and a half. It's just such an interesting, weird kind of dynamic, I guess, on you end up where you're supposed to.
that's yeah, definitely a firm believer in that. That's for sure.
Yes, yes.
Well, cool. Well, I mean, digging into a little bit more on like the strategy, more technical side of things, everything that we do is basically like planning for the unplanned, which is it's so like I always call it organized chaos.
Hmm.
How do you plan for things that you don't know what's going to happen? So like just take me through kind of your mindset and obviously it's changed a little bit now with a different role and a different side of things, but like how do you plan for, the things that you can't even see coming?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the, I guess, blessing and curse of working in social is you always have to be ready and you have to be, on your toes, and things like that can happen at any time. I always point back to, I think one of the probably craziest times from a career perspective for me was when the Phillies signed Bryce Harper in 2019 because it was like the longest free agency of all time. I think we're coming up on the end of February. And everyone's like, "Oh, the Phillies are either going to get Machado or Harper." Like that had been the conversation since I had started in 2017. Like, oh, 2 years that free agency, they're going to get one of them. They can spend. But there's all this pressure of like, who, are they going to sign anybody? And at this point, it's it's crazy late, and we're already down at spring training. We've already, and I think that we had gone to spring training for pitchers and catchers and then gone back up, and we would transition in then from like members on the social team would go down for like another week and a half each, and go throughout the rest of the spring. So it was the day that I was supposed to fly down. I had just gone, like, driven from Citizens Bank Park to my apartment to get my stuff and was about to get an Uber to the airport. um Someone put in our Slack, they were like, "Oh my God, Passon." Or Heyman, I think it was John Heyman who wrote it. And it just said, "Breaking, Bryce to Phillies." And I was like, "Oh my God." I was like, "I'm supposed to be boarding a plane," like and I was so flustered, but so excited. And ultimately everybody ended up flying down because we did the press conference down in Clearwater and all that fun stuff. But we just mobilized because it was something that could have possibly happened, but you're like, how much do you want to plan? And do we make a welcome to Philly graphic? And do we do all, you just have no idea and no concept. And I mean, to this day, I think that is quite literally an organization course of the organization changing signing in so many different ways outside of what he's done, obviously on the field, but just from, jerseys and tickets and everything, like going from that season to then a pandemic season. It just, there's so much about the Harper signing, I think that changed the course of where the Phillies kind of have gone. But it was just such an unprepared, you couldn't possibly prepare for it, even though we knew it could be a viable option.
Yep.
So I think just, staying on your toes and obviously being adaptable, nimble, creative, ready to mobilize, are all those kind of things that are so kind of stressful about working in sports social. It's like at any time you could wake up or you could be taking a nap or, something crazy could happen. But so much fun. It's such like a fire drill, like you said, an organized chaos. And it's just like, all right, we gotta get after it and, make sure we're ready and do the best we possibly can to cover this and celebrate it with our fans. So
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. That just brings back so many memories. Like I remember sitting, I think I was getting my oil changed. So I was sitting at this car dealership and I saw a flash across the bottom when I was out in Phoenix, like the Cardinals trade for DeAndre Hopkins. And I was just like, oh, all right. Well, I should probably get this oil change done pretty
what
quickly.
what am I doing? I gotta get
Yeah.
home. Yeah.
And so it's like,
No,
and then
it
it's like,
is
and then
insane.
it's that like panic and madness. And then it's like, all right, well, we need a plan. We need to figure it out. And then it's like you're gathering assets and what can you do like internally? What can you find? Like so many different things. And then another one was JJ Watt. He signed in Arizona and it
Oh
was
yeah,
the
yeah.
post was him working out in a Cardinal shirt from him saying, source me. And it was like, all right, well, I guess we gotta get on this
Guess we
too.
got to get on. It's actually funny. So we've had some, staffing changes recently. So I'm kind of assisting on the social side now this off season, and with our extension of Aaron Nola, um, right before Thanksgiving is the weekend before Thanksgiving. And I actually was in Gainesville with some of my friends from college, and it was a Sunday, and it's like, okay, like Nola, agrees to a deal with the Phillies, and it was so like I honestly wasn't sure that the Phillies would re-sign him. I was kind of I had no idea, but it went from that, and then usually you kind of have that buffer period, right? It's like they have to go do the physical, and like the team's not going to announce it for like a good 24 hours, and we had prepared for the possibility, but just like we hadn't created anything or done anything, and it was so early in free agency. And I get like a text from our PR team, and they're like, "I think we're gonna try and announce it tomorrow morning." I'm like, "Great, we can like make sure graphics are ready, we can make sure all this stuff." And then they're like, "Actually, he passed physical. Like, can we announce it in like 2 hours?" I guess I'm driving down like Tampa or on my way back to Tampa, and I'm just like in the car trying to.
Yeah.
So it was definitely. I was like, okay, welcome back to helping on the social side. That's for sure. But it was fun. And to your point, it was like you just are like, okay, what do we have to do, and what do I need to get made, and how are we getting this out, and when is PR announcing it? So when are we announcing it? So just definitely that unexpected chaos on a Sunday afternoon when you could be, 3 hours from home on the road
Yep.
and figuring it out. So
Oh, it's so funny. Did you ever watch the show Lost back when it was on TV?
I in and out, but
Sort
not
of.
religiously. Yeah.
The one main character, the doctor, he said like I think he was like a spinal surgeon or something, but he said he's like if I mess up, I let the fear in for like 5 seconds and then I go to work. And it's like that perfectly describes like
Yeah.
every time something happens, it's like you let the panic set in and then it's like, all
Oh,
right, we got stuff to do. Let's go.
completely. I was like, oh my God, who's going to make, we're like hiring a designer. We don't, didn't have one. And I just am like, who's going to make the graphic? What are we going to do? Do we have a video? Just all this. So
Yeah.
definitely fun. Definitely fun problems to figure out and good problems to have. But for sure, that panic definitely hits.
Yeah. Oh man. All right. So everyone talks about attracting a younger audience or demographic. How do you actually do that?
It's actually funny because I think I don't think I know my current role kind of had that was a priority, right? That's that Gen Z kind of targeting Gen Z and obviously baseball has this stigma that it's not, not as sexy as other sports and you kind of struggle with that kind of perception. So how do we get the younger demographic excited about the Phillies and excited about baseball in general? Obviously I think social has a big part in that. You meet people where they are. And I just saw something the other day that between like the youngest age group, like 95% of people in that demographic use YouTube or like are always consuming content on YouTube. Obviously, TikTok's a huge buzz, hot button topic at this time. So, obviously, creating content outside of just sports highlights and things like that are engaging, but also trying to think, how you can make it appealing for them to not even just follow the Phillies maybe on social media, but come to a game and become a fan and ultimately get into that. So it's a good question. And I honestly would love if somebody could tell me exactly how they figured it out. I actually worked with a college class. I work as an adjunct professor for a small school in Nebraska called Midland University. And I helped a different class with a semester long project this semester. And that was one of the things I asked. I was like, your age and ages younger, like what would make you want to come to a Phillies game? And it's very interesting. Like they're very interested in AI, VR, they're very interested in experiential things at the game. So outside of just sitting and watching the game, what can they do? Is there something cool that they can, go take a picture with or do things like that? So, you always want to hammer home certain kind of aspects of the Phillies and making it in a more attractive way. But there are definitely a few things I think that we could probably do better to get to that demographic. But ultimately, I feel like I don't have all the answers, so I'm still looking for them.
I ask this question all the time because I'm hoping somebody has the answer
Somebody,
that can
yeah,
help me.
somebody can tell me. I
Someone's
know.
got
I
that
was like,
secret
like
formula.
yeah, what can we, what can we be doing on college campuses? Philly has so many different colleges. Like how do we get that group? And ultimately all of them are like, we like cheap tickets and, we like food and drinks and that kind of stuff. So how do we make
Yeah.
that part of it? But also, everybody likes cheap tickets and food and drinks. So what can we do specifically to kind of cater to that audience is the
Yeah.
part that's going to be tricky.
Yeah, it's so interesting because it's like, yeah, I mean, make good content. That I mean, of course, yeah, that would be great, but like that still doesn't answer the question, right? Like it's like we can make all the funny, goofy, most random TikToks that you've ever seen, but how does that equate to you seeing this weird slideshow of something on the Pirates TikTok to you're going to go buy a Pirates hat or you're going to come to a Pirates game or like or whatever it might be. It's just it's such a hard line to draw and like path to navigate that it's always an interesting topic.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like you can get them engaged, but it's how do you get them to stick around, right? So, you can engage them with certain pieces of content, or obviously I think something that's been fun to watch throughout my tenure with the Phillies is when I first started my first season, we were 66 and 96. We were just really didn't have any big name stars, didn't have anybody, of that caliber. And now there's so many fun personalities and likable guys and notable people within the baseball realm. So it's been interesting and fun to see, just even like maybe they're not a fan of the Phillies, but maybe it's somebody that loves Bryce Harper, and that kid that loves Bryce Harper and thinks he's so cool is going to then buy a Bryce Harper jersey. But then maybe he's like, oh, I like watching Bryce play, but that guy is pretty cool too. I really like JT Realmuto. And then they become a Phillies fan kind of by proxy. So it's been cool to kind of have those stars and names to capitalize on, which is obviously not, that's a luxury and obviously not something that's going to happen. Sports are cyclical, so you do have to still be ready to make the great content in the tough times. And I definitely had plenty of experience doing that for many years.
For sure. Well, yeah, and I mean, like I was talking to another guest about like I love watching soccer. Like I think the first sports league that came back, and this could be wrong, but the first one I remember watching that came back from the pandemic was the Italian like professional soccer league. So I picked a team. I was like, I gotta watch sports. I miss it so much. Who should I watch? And so I picked my team. I watched Juventus. Like that was my team. But then it was like, who out like then you fall in love with these guys and like how they play and like the crowd and the different things that they do, even if they don't speak the same language that I speak. It's so interesting when it's like such an arbitrary decision. And like I did the same thing with the Premier League because I keep watching soccer and I'm like, all right, well,
Yeah.
the Fenway Sports Group, who owns the Pittsburgh Penguins, my favorite hockey team, they own Liverpool, so that's going to be my new soccer team. And then you watch a few games, you see different guys that you like, and the performance and different, and it's like then you're in. But it's like how do you take that kind of arbitrary decision and like help guide someone to make it?
It's so true. And I think the thing that's funny, in Philly, you find so much tradition, right? And you're either like born into fandom based off of what your parents are fans of or where you live. And Philly, I think is so unique in a lot of ways. And it's something that I've grown to love so much about the city is, for better or worse, they are very, very passionate about their sports teams. But you have that deep rooted lineage of like, regardless of what's going to happen, they're going to be there and riding for it. But it's definitely like targeting those other fans or those fans that are more casual. And to your point, like I grew up in Tampa. I was a Tampa sports fan for a lot of ways, but we never had an NBA team. So like my brothers followed the Orlando Magic, but I really like basketball, but I kind of just like fell in love with different athletes. I really liked LeBron. I really like Kevin Durant, so I still don't have like an affinity or a loyalty from an NBA perspective, but it's kind of been fun to navigate it that way. You don't have the heartbreak, that's for sure. You're like, oh, I'd
Yeah.
like to see that guy win, but you're not like, oh my God, I'm gonna
Yeah. Well, that
drive
was
to the
my
nearest bridge when they lose.
I know that's like NBA, same thing in Pittsburgh. Like we never had, like, we still don't have an NBA team, but like I loved watching basketball. Like I went to high school in Cleveland, and it was right around the time like LeBron was, I think, 2 years older than I was. So it was like he was coming up with the Cavs, and that was exciting. Then he went to but I wasn't a Cavs fan. I was a LeBron fan, and like he went to the
Right.
Heat, so then I was a Heat fan. Then he went back to the Cavs, and I was like, all right, this is too much. Um, but then when I moved to Phoenix, it was like the bubble happened and the Suns went on this run and it was so exciting to watch. I was
Yeah, yeah, that was
like
fun.
Devin Booker. I was like, this is my team now. And so like now I'm in it where it's like you feel that heartbreak every year where it's like it's so close and it's not happening and it's so tough.
It's funny. I will say, like, I obviously, as most people do, I think like probably the most invested I've ever been in outside of a team I've worked for or for the Gators, for better or worse, in all sports. But I was like the last, like my dad went to Florida, so like after everything happened, I was like, oh, like I kind of lost that, like I'm gonna, I'm so mad kind of sports thing. And I honestly think the Phillies this postseason like really brought back that passion for me. I was like crushed when like so crushed.
Yeah.
And I like in college, I used to, would be that way too. We went to the Final Four one year and lost a team that I thought thought they were going to win it all. I think that was like the first time I remember as someone that's too old to be crying at the result of a sports game, that I cried at the result of a sports game. And then similarly, like even like I mean maybe because also the Gators haven't been very good on the football field in the most recent years, but I kind of been like a little not apathetic. I'm still angry, but I'm not like I once was. And then this postseason, I was like, oh my God, like I will be heartbroken. So
Yeah, you get to the
anyway,
point where it just like it's unpleasant, but it doesn't ruin your day. And it's like
yes,
for me, it's like I've always like I loved Pittsburgh sports growing up, obviously in Pittsburgh, but it was like it was like it's everything here. And I think that's why like Philly and Pittsburgh don't get along all that well because they're so similar and like their fandom is just
Hmm.
like we bleed these teams like no, nothing else. And so it's like it's always been going from like working for the Steelers where it was like I was already a diehard fan and then I was part of it. It was like everything was so heartbreaking. And
Oh, I'm sure.
then going to Arizona where it was like I didn't really know much about the team or the organization, but then once you're in it, it's like I care so much about this team and like it and then you have that heartbreak and it's like so then all of the other sports that you used to follow so closely and like it made you so upset. It's like they kind of fade a little bit more to the back burner of like, all right, well,
Totally.
at least I'm not working for this
It
team.
is funny. People ask me that a lot because I think a lot of people that work for the Phillies too, are people from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, like from the area. I'm kind of almost an outlier being from Florida, because a lot of people just stay and it's just such a deeply rooted kind of tradition city. So it's funny, like I was a diehard Tampa Bay Rays fan in high school and then going into college. And when I got to the Phillies, everyone's like, "Oh, like, are you just gonna like lose that fandom?" And I've not lost it, but I obviously will still root for the Rays in certain scenarios. But I'm like, you just like when you're in it and like living it, and you get to even like know players on a personal level, and like they become so easy to root for, and just like the other, other people that you meet throughout the organization. It's like it's so hard to not get so invested. Um, and it is like it's just very interesting because it's not that I would say I abandoned fandom from many years, but it's just such a different kind of fandom, and I think probably why it hurts maybe even a little bit worse too
Of
to not
course.
win. But
Yeah, for sure. Well, hey, let's go. I want to dig into kind of the advice for, we talked about the younger audience, the younger demographic, but those who are looking to, follow in your footsteps, follow in my footsteps, like get into this industry. What is something that you wish you kind of knew when you were in their shoes? And, we talked about your journey earlier, but like, what do you wish that you know now you could have known back then?
I honestly think I would say probably maybe not an answer you're expecting, but probably more on the perspective side. I think like it's so important to be invested and to care about your job and to do good work. But there are a lot more important things than your job and doing good work. And I think obviously to get there, especially, back when we started and got into this, I was like, I want to do everything. I want to take every opportunity. I want to prove that I deserve to be here and I should be here. And maybe overworked myself to a degree or signed on to do things that I probably shouldn't have done. And ultimately, I don't regret any of that, but I just think you know you can do this in a degree to kind of give yourself balance and prioritize yourself and your own mental health and your family and your friends and the things that are important to you outside of work because at the end of the day I hate to say this but like anyone in a job is replaceable or things can happen but you can't get back that time or those that sort of stuff so I think that is important. I also think just like the value of relationship building is probably what I would say is the most important thing in this industry. I always say this to prospective students and things like that. You think there are a lot of different sports teams and you think this and that, but like the industry in itself is pretty small and there's probably someone at most teams or organizations that I can be somewhat familiar with or feel comfortable reaching out to or so just making sure you never know what's going to happen, but it's not never a bad idea to have a conversation or to kind of build those relationships. And then obviously, keep up those relationships. And, it's a pretty small industry. So reputation is important in a lot of ways, but
Sure.
just working hard and being eager and all that is definitely important.
No, for sure. Yeah, and I mean it's a job and it's a great job, and I honestly have no idea what else I would be doing, but it's just part of who you are. It's not the entirety of who you are. So making sure you have those boundaries, and everyone talks about mental health and being burnt out and work-life balance. Well, a lot of that you have to fight for it in some regard, but you have to do it for yourself too, right? Like if you don't have work to do in an evening, but you go home just to get ahead and you want to continue to work, like you have to find those ways to break apart and separate yourself. And like on vacation trying to like delete some of my social apps just because it's like it's almost like a habit of, oh, I have 5 seconds to sit here, I'm going to look at what someone's tweeting about baseball or free agents. And it's like you have to find your own way to just like remove yourself from work and be your whole person.
Totally. I mean, it takes a great degree of like fortitude to do that. It's not an easy thing, and I think it's easier said than done. And I think something I thought about a lot in recent years was just like identity. And, it used to always be like, oh, like my friend Miss, this is Missy. She works for the Phillies, or this is Missy. She does this. And I feel like even like my parents, at parties and things would say it. And I'm like, okay, but who am I outside of that? I was like, there's just
Right.
so many things that I am that's not, this is Missy. She does social media for the Phillies. And obviously to your point, it is in many ways like a cool thing to talk about or tell people. And obviously people know sports and can relate to that or that sort of fandom, but it is so important to like have priorities and hobbies and things you like to do outside of work because it's so easy to get sucked into the hole that like everything is revolving around this because social never stops and sports never stops, but definitely important. And I think you'll ultimately probably drive yourself crazy if you haven't already, if you don't kind of have those passions and that life outside of it.
For sure. Well, so in a position where you've hired people before, this is a big part of all of the messages that I get on, LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever it might be, of just like, what advice, how can I stand out, things like that. So it's from a hiring manager's perspective and knowing that it's a cover letter, it's a resume, it's two pieces of paper that basically decide what you're doing with the rest of your life. How do you use those two pieces of paper to your advantage to get these opportunities and get your foot in the door?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think, to that point, and again, I joke about my mom kind of asking every little question, but you just don't really know where an opportunity might come from or like what kind of conversation might lead to an opportunity. So I think if you're very passionate about something, it's funny, like when I was in college, it wasn't really a thing to like message people on LinkedIn or do this. And I will be the first to admit it. I may not be the best. I may not be the best at replying to all of these messages or getting, but there are certain, I'll talk to college classes, I'll do things like that. And I think the kids that come back and are eager to learn more, just have a conversation, are the ones that are consistently impress me because they're passionate about it. I think obviously there's opportunity at like a smaller level from where you're in college or whatever to kind of get involved on the sports side or try and run social, and I think that's always impressive to me too. It's maybe fresh out of school, but I helped run Florida's whatever, and just sort of taking advantage of those opportunities. Obviously when I speak to somebody, you can get a pretty good sense on to what their vibe is in a way, in terms of just like, obviously sports is fun, but are you just here because you like the Phillies? Are you just here because you're a Phillies fan? Because if so, you're not going to love this job. You're going to want to be passionate about the work itself and be passionate about the creativity and that, as opposed to just because you like watching Bryce Harper hit home runs. So definitely attitude and sort of eagerness, but that kind of feel, which I think is something that's really tough to quantify in two pieces of paper. And I think, why that sort of experience or previous conversations or, getting to that point where maybe you have an interview is something that is really important to kind of stake out in an interview.
For sure. Yeah. And honestly, like reaching out to anyone in the industry just to learn and connect and
Mm-hmm.
ask any questions that you might have. You never know. Like it could be some person who's reached out to you 2 years ago and you have a meaningful conversation about like, oh, this was a great conversation. I'll remember this person. Then you have a job where it's like, oh, I definitely remember this person because I talked to him a year ago. Like, let's interview him. So
Mm-hmm.
it's the most like simple process. And the thing that always gets forgotten when it comes to social media is like it's the connections. We have all of these platforms that we manage for a living, but like you can use them to your advantage. I mean, like that's what LinkedIn is for me. Like I think all of my other social platforms have fallen off a drastic cliff because I just don't have time to do anything. But LinkedIn is a place where it's like I can share stuff about the industry and talk about like stuff that I read, and it's like the perfect group of people where it's like you learn so much back and forth from all these great people. It's like why not reach out? Why not talk to them? Because you never know how it could help down the road.
Totally. And yeah, exactly. Like it doesn't just because there may not be a job open right now doesn't mean that there won't be in the future. And, making a good first impression and being personable and professional is obviously something that's important. But again, like I got my first internship via the financial advisor that was helping my parents budget building a new house, who knew somebody who worked at the Rays and blindly passed along my resume. They happened to have an opening, and then from there, my boss in Cleveland knew somebody who worked at the Rays. My boss in Philly knew, my boss in Cleveland. So
Yeah.
ultimately, then I kind of built, I guess a reputation or whatever for myself, and had that sort of where that led me to ultimately other goals. But the first one was totally a fluke. I mean, it was
Yeah.
completely, totally out of the blue, and look at me now. So
That's it.
definitely not being afraid to kind of have those conversations and take those chances.
For sure. Well, cool. Well, I just want to finish up. I have a few different quick hitter questions that you can
All
answer as
right, let's do
quickly
it.
or as slowly as you want. The first one has been the most challenging. Um,
Oh boy. All right, I'm
but
ready.
so my first question is, what is your least favorite industry buzzword?
Oh man, there are so many.
So
There's like
many.
corporate buzzwords and then there's like social industry buzzwords. I think social wise, I cannot stand guru. I hate when people say like a social guru. I don't even know if I would call that a buzzword, but something that definitely sticks out. And then I think probably social wise, but also just like corporate that I have found so often is low hanging fruit. I feel like everyone says that in every conversation. And I guess there's not really a nice other way to say it, like another, but if I hear low hanging fruit one more time,
I love that. Yeah, that's a good
I
one.
have been, yeah, I have been like, I'm not perfect here. I've absolutely been at
Yeah.
fault for that at times, but it's too much.
Yes, I speak in exclusively buzzwords at this point in my life. So it's like
I love it.
I
What's your least favorite?
oh, my least favorite. I don't know. I mean, anything from like storytelling or
Mm,
I guess personality is not really a buzzword, but I think like viral was one that
mm.
one of my guests said where it's like how do you like
What
that
does that
doesn't
even
even
mean
exist. Yeah,
anymore?
what does
Yeah,
that mean?
yeah,
So there's quite a few. I need to narrow down what my least favorite one is, but there's yeah, there's a lot.
yeah. There are so
Um
many.
Parks and Rec or The Office.
The Office.
Okay.
I like both, but The Office.
Yeah. Friends or Seinfeld.
Friends.
Good. Cool Ranch or nacho cheese.
Oh, this one's so easy. It's Cool Ranch. I
Yeah.
feel very passionately about that one.
That was
I
it's an easy
don't know
one.
that there's a better chip than a Cool Ranch Dorito.
That's true. I love Cool Ranch. My favorites are Cheetos though, which is obviously not an option, but
Oh yeah, I love Cheetos too. And that's not to say like I like nacho cheese. I just think Cool Ranch is like in a league of its own.
oh yeah, for sure. All right, so more social questions.
Oh boy,
TikTok, Reels, or Shorts?
TikTok. I love TikTok. I think this like scrolling of TikTok, you can't get, again, it probably lost many hours of productive hours to doing so, but you don't get that experience on Reels or Shorts for me.
For sure. Yeah, and I mean like it's become very much like it's almost like not YouTube light, but it's like that's how my viewing habits are on TikTok now, where it's like I'll watch something for a few minutes and then go to the next thing or click on it and watch, five or six of this person's stuff. And it's like, it's so funny where, Instagram, Twitter, like you're just kind of scrolling and like, oh, okay, I'll stop for a second. I'm out. Where YouTube, TikTok, you're like, all right, I'm kind of
You
in
get
this to,
sucked in.
yeah,
Yes, yes. For better or worse, you are
yeah.
sucked in.
Google Plus or IGTV.
Oh man. Pour one out. Pour one out for both of them. IGTV only because I never had Google Plus.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
think you missed much on that one.
yeah. I mean, I think I downloaded it at the time, but I don't think I ever used it. So I guess it's IGTV, but I don't know that I'd go to battle for either of them.
Yeah, I think that's a losing battle. But yeah, I remember I'm pretty sure we definitely had Google Plus when I was with the Speedway, and I'm pretty sure we had a Google Plus with the Steelers at
That's
one point
hilarious.
before before its demise. Um,
Yeah.
all right, last one.
Okay.
Rank the or rate the finale of Game of Thrones from 1 to 10.
It's hard. It's so hard because the series was so good. and the finale was so underwhelming, disappointing. Um, but it's like I don't know if I discredit everything with I don't know. It's like a five, I think, which is probably
Five.
generous. People probably even gave it less than that. Only because I think I just like love the show so much. But yeah, I
That's
brutal,
that.
brutal ending.
I think it's fair. Yeah, for me, it was like I picked up Game of Thrones late, so it was like I think I
Hmm.
watched. I forget. I think it was like 5 or 6 seasons or something like that. But I only watched like the last 2 seasons live with like the world,
Yeah,
and
same, same. I started it in like 2017, so I think I watched the
yeah,
first few seasons by myself, or like binged them, and then I
right.
caught up like yeah, the last one or two.
Yeah. So it was just like I was caught up in that. Like it was so cool where like sporting events, yeah, it's the same thing. But just like you knew the whole world was watching Game of Thrones
Hmm.
from like 9 to 10 or whatever it was on a Sunday night. And it was just like you're going on like Twitter and seeing what everyone's saying. It was just I think I was so caught up in that. Like I don't even necessarily remember how it ended at this point. I remember everyone being mad and I was just kind of like, yeah, whatever, it's fine.
Well, spoiler alert, a few years later, but like Daenerys is evil, and then Bran ends up on the Iron Throne. It's like of all people, like Bran
Yeah.
is such a not fun character to, and I just
Yeah.
whatever. But I yeah, no, I agree. That appointment viewing. Did you watch Succession?
No, I
Have
haven't
you watched
yet.
Succession? Okay,
Uh-uh.
you should. You absolutely should. But I will say like that this last season of Succession, I also caught up on that pretty late. I think like 2021. Maybe I watched the first three binge and then this last one I watched live, but that was like the closest that I've thought since Game of Thrones. Like not
Yeah.
to the degree of Game of Thrones, but the closest of like, okay, Sunday night people are going to be locked in, or like you're going to be on Twitter and you're going to see people talking about it. Um, Also a disappointing ending, to be honest, but a very very good show.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy too because it doesn't happen as much anymore. It's like Squid Game was like this huge global phenomenon. Like everyone watched it, but it was like it came out, they were all out, you watched them all, and then it was like, okay, who's finished it already? It wasn't like
Right.
you had to
You
be
can't like
at this
talk about it
place.
in live. Yes,
Yes.
yes.
What's your theories? What do you like? That was always my favorite thing with Lost way back in the day, looping back around. But it was like the end of every episode, you were just like, what just happened? And then it was like the whole week you were talking with all your friends trying to figure out what happened. And then it was like all new questions the next week. Another very disappointing ending. Um, but yeah, it was just like that group, like your whole like the whole world was watching the same thing, and it was so cool.
It is, yeah, that you do lose that a lot with like streaming and stuff now, because I feel like even like looking up, right? Like even if you go to watch a series, it's like I'm bad at this, which a lot of my friends make fun of me for this, but I like love spoiling stuff. So I'll like oftentimes look up things before I watch it, which is not, I don't know what that says about me. But with like live TV, you can't, Game of Thrones is so cool because it's like if I'm putting it on when it's starting, like it's not going to be out there.
Yep.
The books aren't finished, so we don't know. We can't see what happened in the book. Like you really have no idea. And I think
Yeah.
it's kind of for somebody who says she loves spoiling things, it's kind of cool that I don't have the option to because I know I don't have the self restraint to not do it. But
Oh, that's
anyway.
awesome. Well,
No,
cool. Well, honestly, like I really appreciate it. It was
of
awesome
course.
to take some time and get to know each other a little bit better and hopefully, everyone who's going to watch this, the, millions and millions of people that'll watch this, will get a lot out of it and learn from your journey and your advice and I honestly I can't thank you enough.
No, of course. I appreciate you reaching out.
Cool. All right. Well, I we'll see you again soon and thanks everyone for watching.